Hey there, this is Mr. Icarus, and welcome to yet another edition of Doom Mod Madness. This time round, we are checking out Ashes 2063, Dead Man Walking. I'll forgive you for having a little bit of deja vu with this one. Yes, I have indeed covered Ashes 2063 before, but Dead Man Walking is actually a mini expansion for Ashes 2063 that gives you a standalone story and a bunch of brand new levels for you to fight through. And let's be honest, having more of this to play through is no bad thing at all. For those of you unfamiliar with Ashes 2063, it may seem obvious, but this is a mod set very much in the post-apocalypse, and you play the part of a scavenger or scav tasked with surviving in this harsh environment, be it against mutants, radioactive bug dogs, or just roving gangs of bandits. In this case, you've been left for dead by one such gang, a gang known as the Rippers, and Dead Man Walking has you set on a path of revenge, tracking them down and retrieving the one thing that this character holds close to his heart, that of course being his motorbike. An interesting thing about Dead Man Walking is that it's actually authored by someone other than Vostok, who created the first installment of Ashes 2063. This, in fact, comes to us courtesy of Reformed Joe, who has done an absolutely fantastic job, in my opinion, of adhering to that aesthetic and mapping style that Vostok instigated for Ashes 2063. And that style is very much reflective of build engine era style games, be it like Duke 3D or Shadow Warrior. And what that usually entails is more realistic feeling environments that feel like they are used, they're utilitarian, they have purpose, they have story. And that is very much a feeling that's present here in Dead Man Walking. The thing that impresses me most is that this kind of consistency and attention to detail is applied across a pretty broad canvas, because, believe it or not, this is still part of the opening map that I'm playing here. This does stretch on for quite a while, going through multiple permutations, changing tone and atmosphere, leading up to moments such as this, where you're trapped in a corridor against these horrifying, ethereal mutant creatures. It's just pulled off with such confidence and in such an organic and seamless feeling way that you can't help but get thoroughly immersed in the world of Ashes 2063, and particularly that of Dead Man Walking. Much like the initial installment of Ashes, Dead Man Walking will occasionally provide you brief respite from the horrors of the wasteland, usually in the form of NPC settlements. In Dead Man Walking, there's really only one large-scale NPC settlement, and that would be Baker's Hope. And here you can talk to the quartermaster, trade in some junk for some beneficial items, and even upgrade a few weapons. In my case, I didn't have quite enough junk to upgrade my SMG, forcing me instead to consider a rather difficult choice. I could make up the extra junk, but it would actually require me to trade in my sawn-off shotgun. Now, I'm not entirely sure whether this would be the case for someone who's a little bit more diligent, let's say, in hoovering up the junk found during the wasteland travels, but I found it a very intriguing decision to have to consider. Sure, you'll have a vastly improved SMG, one that can in fact take enemies by surprise and prevent other enemies from being alerted, but do you really want to have to trade in what's essentially your bread and butter? Following Baker's Hope, you'll endure a mercifully short sewer section before emerging into the dusty daylight of an abandoned train yard. It's just another great example of the kind of mapping that Dead Man Walking does exceedingly well. I mean, for one, there's that degree of authenticity with the environmental design itself. It's absolutely on point. You don't doubt for a second that this is a train depot, that it's a dusty post-apocalyptic train depot, but it goes further than that. Those train tracks connect to the next environment, which is a waste disposal dump. And it's just that degree of thought, that degree of attention to detail that consistently impresses me throughout the course of Dead Man Walking. There's a serious amount of consideration spent on the details, how it's supposed to flow, how it's supposed to connect, how it's supposed to make sense, and that's the kind of stuff that I frequently find I get hung up on myself when I ever attempt doing mapping, because I'm constantly thinking, well, what purpose does this area serve? Where does it go? Who uses it? Why does it exist? And it's all of these questions I find are readily answerable in Dead Man Walking. Even better, this is done without sacrificing readability. And when I refer to readability, it means where you're supposed to go next, how the player is supposed to find their way. And even though this is a relatively open space, there's very definable points of interest throughout it that guide you, that seem like a good idea to check out, meaning that it's not really going to be too long before you find that switch that opens up the train shed here, that leads you through and lets you find the next thing that will allow you to pass through onto the following environment. It's really intelligent mapping, and intelligent mapping is a hard concept to kind of describe and convey in video form, because it's something that you have to kind of experience for yourself, to play through and feel for you to get. But other than that, it certainly doesn't hurt that while you're in the process of enjoying the flow of these levels, you're also enjoying the rather good accompanying soundtrack. Fun fact, the person behind the soundtrack for Ashes 2063 and a few extra tracks that he contributed for Dead Man Walking is someone by the name of Primeval. Additional fun fact, Primeval is also responsible for the frankly stellar soundtrack for the mod I covered last week, which would be Abyssum: Dawn of Innocence. This is one talented chap. I gotta say, I thoroughly enjoy the soundtrack for both, but the soundtrack here certainly evokes the likes of John Carpenter, that post-apocalyptic outlaw feel. It's all-round pretty goddamn great stuff. Makes you feel like a badass, and that's exactly what this kind of mod needs. I don't think I can actually overstate enough just how important appropriate musical accompaniment can be to any given medium, be it a mod, a video game, or a movie. You can imagine one of your favorite action scenes that's got a soundtrack behind it, take that soundtrack out, the feel of the scene changes entirely, and the same is true of levels in mods and various video games. And the thing about Ashes and Dead Man Walking is that it knows how to use the lack of musical soundtrack to its advantage too. In certain points during the levels, the soundtrack will drop out, and instead will leave you with the ambience of the surroundings, and that's important to consider too. Especially if you don't want your level to feel kind of lifeless and flat with just that lack of anything going on. You want that thrum of machinery somewhere. You want that trickling of water. Maybe even just that simple ticking of the Geiger counter is something that can help bring a quieter section of a level to life. Even better, it can be used to ratchet up the tension, such as the weird, creepy, ethereal mutants I encountered earlier, or leading up to moments like this, where you're ambushed by 3 big fat flamethrower-wielding super mutants. And quite frankly, these are all tools that both Ashes 2063 and Dead Man Walking use exceedingly well. If I had to pick one of my favorite moments in Dead Man Walking, however, I'd certainly point towards the Feast of Freedom, hosted by post-apocalyptic George Washington, a complete nutcase that rambles on about freedom and liberty and being a patriot and not being a filthy communist. And the thing that makes this is you do have a few interesting choices in the dialogue. It's some funny stuff, and it even allows you to make a pretty significant choice midway through. Yep, turns out if you just get comprehensively sick of him, you can just kill him, get the keycard, and continue on your merry way as if nothing happened. It made me chuckle for a good long while after I was allowed to do that, so hats off. Hats off, Dead Man Walking. Just make sure you buy the supplies you need before you decide to kill him. Heading into the final section of Dead Man Walking, it's clear that the challenge is ramped up by a fair few degrees, especially with this section here, which has you facing off against a horde of hags. It feels like a section that's very much designed to have you expend a fair amount of ammunition before you finally reach the headquarters of the bandit gang you've sworn to take revenge on. But by this point, you'll be exceedingly well armed anyway. Dead Man Walking wastes precious little time in introducing you to the firepower that you'll need during the course of your mission, and all of the familiar faces return from Ashes 2063, from the pistol to the revolver, the shotgun, the sawn-off, the sniper rifle, the flamethrower, and of course, the pipe bombs. In terms of things that I think are omitted from Dead Man Walking, it's probably in relation to things like the stims, which in this case only take the form of the anti-radiation pills that get you through areas such as the toxic waste dump. But then again, those items may still be present somewhere within Dead Man Walking. I wasn't particularly obsessed about tracking down secrets during the course of my playthrough, so at some point they may be discoverable. Who knows? So, would I recommend Dead Man Walking? Absolutely yes. If you're looking for a little bit more action after completing Ashes 2063, or maybe even if you're looking for a more bite-sized introduction to the world of Ashes itself, then Dead Man Walking pretty much has you covered. This, from front to back, only took me about an hour and a half to complete. It's just constructed in a fashion that is, in my opinion, supremely satisfying to play through. The flow of the levels is absolutely fantastic, the gunplay is rock solid, the post-apocalyptic aesthetic is almost perfectly realized, and the soundtrack kicks ass. I really don't know what more I need to say about Dead Man Walking, or even Ashes 2063. If you haven't started playing it, this is your cue. Go download it. Link is in the description below. While I'm at it, I'd like to give a great big thank you to my wonderful patrons over on Patreon. Thank you so much for supporting the channel and for helping to make content like this possible. If you're interested in lending a hand yourself, maybe you'd like to see your name in the credits, or maybe you'd like to get your hands on early editions of my videos before anyone else. If that's the case, the link to my Patreon page is also in the description below. Hopefully you've enjoyed this video. Feel free to let me know what you thought in the comments, and feel free to suggest any mod you'd like to see me cover in future editions of Doom Mod Madness. This has been Mr. Icarus. Thank you very much for watching. Icarus out.